And happy podcasting day, everybody. Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, happy December. This year's almost over, and gentlemen, we're here. We're still here.
We're still alive.
I'm still standing, as Elton said.
He did.
Yeah, shout out to Elton for writing a great song or performing a great song that very much encapsulates, you gotta stand up sometimes. So, shout out to Elton.
Did you watch the animated show Sing?
I did. I have children, so
saying that. He did a good job.
Yeah, and he also was in the biopic about Elton John too, so.
Yeah, I'm not allowed to talk about that because Yumi and I have a thing where, I'm just kind of trying to figure out why Taron Egerton and Elton John's careers are not completely intertwined.
he is Elton John.
Yeah.
Essentially, yeah. It's interesting. Anyway. No, but Elton and Taron gave us this I'm Still Standing theme song for the Seahawks and Seahawk fans, and I
feel like
you can't knock it down with one losing season.
I feel like Seahawk fans are standing, but the Seahawks are definitely not. I really don't know where we are. So normally we do like a State of the Seahawks podcast at the end of the year, but our year's pretty much done. We've got 2 games left. We're not going to make the playoffs. We only have 2 games left. But we're really talking about what is the state of the Seahawks, and we've been kind of talking about it for these past several ones. But man, does it feel like it feels like everything's just gonna fall. Like people are just gonna get their legs swept out from under them because no one knows what's gonna happen, right? No one knows what is the next step in this Seahawks world that we've kind of this bubble that we've been living in for since 2010.
10 years. It's a little interesting because a lot of teams, when they get to this point, it's more obvious and it's more clear what to do next. I mean, even the Patriots last year, there's no longer Tom Brady on your team. There's no question who you're keeping, coach or quarterback, or who's more important. Tom's gone, Gronk is gone. It's the coach or nothing, and the coach is still looking effective from any angle. Whereas with us,
yeah, and to that parallel, even in Pete's first year, we all knew Hasselbeck was here for one more year, and he was not going to come back. It was pretty clear that Pete was not going to extend Matt Hasselbeck. He wasn't in the long-term plans, but he was here for one final year. He and Charlie Whitehurst, they split games due to injuries and other reasons in that final year. They made the playoffs, but they also made 250 roster transactions in that first year. They flipped that roster so much. You knew they were building towards something, and Pete was putting his stamp all over the team. You could see what direction they were going in. You maybe didn't know exactly where would they come out on the other end. I feel like on this end, there are so many things that could happen. There's so many questions about what the roster could look like, what the front office could look like, what the coaching staff could look like. It really is something that could be totally brand new to Seahawk fans in the new season. And we still have 2 games left to talk about it.
It's not over yet. Kill me.
I mean, is this what other fans feel like? Is this what Jets fans feel like every offseason?
I don't think so, because when you're a Jet fan or a Browns fan before last year, you still embrace the regular season because you were probably what I was in the 80s and the late 70s, where you didn't really expect the playoffs. So it wasn't about the playoffs. I used to check the box scores every Monday morning to see how many yards Largent had or Kurt Warner had, and it was still success was important, but it was just kind of measured different ways, and you had to take more pleasure in individual players' achievements. So, yeah, I would obsessively check Steve Largent's stats every Monday. When the paper back in the day before the internet, you got the paper Monday morning. It had all the stats from the days, the previous day's games, and I would compare. And I'd get really mad if James Jefferson was really close to beating Steve Largent, and I was always thinking he didn't have as many catches as he should have. And then I'd compare running backs, and it was all about that. Whereas now, we're used to the playoffs. We want to be in the playoffs. We think we should be in the playoffs. And so now, like, Zeb's like, yeah, like, shoot me. I have to go through 2 more games that don't matter because we're talking about, like, next year how to get into the playoffs. And I don't think that's how the Jet fans are thinking of things. They're getting closer because they've had so many top number 1 picks, including ours next year. So then maybe they're getting there. But I think most Jets fans are still, like, looking at each game and kind of getting the pleasure out of it where you can. You know what I mean?
Tony chiming in on the chat saying that we deserve it. I don't know what we deserve, Tony, but Tony and I are facing each other in our fantasy playoffs this year. It's for the championship. He beat me in week 1, and had I won, I would have had the 1 seed, and I would have had an easier road. So, shout out to Tony for challenging me and making the fantasy year fun. But I think what's really interesting is Seahawks fans have not been in this mindset for so long. Even in that T-Jack year in 2011, where the defense was really great, but we still ended up 7-9, I didn't feel as if this was like the end. We still had so much to look forward to, and they just kind of built and built and built. It's weird to be in this situation where we don't know what it's going to look like. And I think to your point, Ross, that the Jets and other teams that are constantly, drafting in the first 5 picks, every other year, they have to look at it in a much different way. And Tony says, the playoffs, we deserve it every year. This is a team that, for the past 7 years, I feel like everyone says if it's not a Super Bowl year, it's a failure. We probably have to come in and reset our expectations, because now it's not even just like playoffs. We have to kind of lower it more depending on what the offseason looks like, where we're going to be like, okay, well, we want to put a competitive team together. We want to win more games than we lose. We want to challenge for our playoff spot. All those things that we took for granted, they're totally reset.
Dude, you sound like you're just beset with despair, man.
I don't know.
You sound like
I don't know if it's despair.
It sounds like somebody just like sold the team out from under you or something, man.
I don't think it's that. I think what it is just like, I don't know what is going to happen. Like, the unknowns for this team are so big, and the opportunities, they're so, the spectrum of what could happen is so varied. It really could be like a totally different team, or we could have almost like 80% of the same team from last year on the front office, on the coaching staff, and the roster.
Okay, here's a question then, like, to that point. So you referenced 2010, 2011, where there was like 250 roster changes.
Yeah.
Churning the roster. I mean, it was mostly the bottom 10, 15 people you're churning there, but still, it was happening. If we're not where we need to be, and if we're not a playoff team anymore, and if we're what our record says, should that be the process that we're going through right now? Should we be seeing more of that? Should we have seen more always compete, and this roster is not getting it done? Should this season have looked more like that? Should last season arguably have looked like that? We were NFC champions last year, but nobody thought our roster was that great. Should we be seeing more in-season roster turnover right now?
I think in order to answer that question, at least for me, and Zeb, definitely feel free to give your thoughts on it, is the 2008 and 2009 rosters, so Holmgren's last year, Mora's only year, those were just bad teams. They won 4 and 5 games over the span of 2 years. We're maybe going to win 6 games this year. Maybe we'll get one more win. I don't know. We'll see. But there's talent on this. I feel like there's talent on this team. I try and think back to that 2008, 2009 team. Like, who are the talented players that we were going to keep for years to come? And I honestly can't think of anyone. Like, the only big person that stayed in that time is maybe Brandon Mebane and Red Bryant. And Red Bryant, he had to move to a different position in order to be successful. So I look at those 2008, 2009 team, I'm trying to think of anyone on that roster that was worth anything that ended up making an impact in 2010, 11, and 12, and our Super Bowl run. I don't think there are a lot of players like that. Whereas this team, like there are plenty of players on this 2021 roster that I would be very happy to see on the 2022 roster.
But that's one of the things, though, that we've danced around and occasionally dipped into the last season and a half is if all these players really are as good as we say they are, then why aren't we any good?
I think that's a fair question. But, we're going to move along with the show. So the Seahawks get embarrassed in back-to-back games, killing any hope of salvaging a late playoff run as they fall to the Rams and the Bears. The Seahawks have nothing to play for as they face the Detroit Lions in the first of their final 2 games. In what started as a promising year, we are only left with questions for the entire team and the front office. Normally we end the podcast season with our State of the Seahawks in the finale, but it feels like we're talking about that now. This is the Hawkscast.net podcast, and Zeb, topic number 1, I need to know what went wrong. If you're going to look at one thing or all the things, what went wrong?
Sorry, real quick. Can you define the terms? Is this like with the team, with the year, with the what?
I'll let you pick. I'm gonna let you pick. If you've got opinions on all of them, then you've got all of them. I'll put a timer for Ross so we can move on to topic 2. But if you had to think of one thing, Zeb, what went wrong this year?
God, I don't know. I wish I knew. Look, I think we've talked about Russell a lot and on and off the show. It seems as though he's not the player that he used to be, or the player that we all thought he would be at this point in his career, right? It's weird. It's there's so much going on. It's like these last couple of seasons with the defense starting out kind of slow and sloppy, but then getting better throughout the year. And I think at this point, I think most of us probably agree that we have a relatively formidable defense, right? Like they're not the best defense in the league, but they're pretty good. And we do have a lot of playmakers on offense, and probably one of the better offensive lines that we've had in recent seasons. And yet we fail to win games. We're leaving points on the field. We're missing out on opportunities to end games by not being able to make that kill shot or make that final last stop when we need to. It's kind of uncharted territory for the Pete Carroll Seahawks. So, obviously everything starts at the top. I think the lack of drafting well over the years has kind of caught up to us. But I think more than anything, Russell just doesn't seem like he's the guy that can go out and win those football games for you anymore. And I don't know if it's a relationship issue or a coaching issue or he has too much going on off the field. I don't know, but he just doesn't seem to have progressed to the point where we thought he would be at this point in his career, which is, I think reasonably we expected him to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I think it's pretty safe to say he's just not that anymore.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the direction I would head in. Ross, if you wanted to pick a thing of what went wrong, where would you start?
Well, first of all, I can sense right now Austin somewhere right now is like hiring a hitman to go after Zeb.
Bring it on.
Man, one thing. So Carl Sagan, give the most Ross answer ever.
Jesus.
So Carl Sagan once was like put on the spot, like about like, are there aliens? And like he's like, I don't know. Are there aliens? I don't know. You're Carl Sagan. How can you know? And like finally the reporter says to Carl Sagan, like, well, what does your gut tell you? And Carl Sagan gave the very good answer. He said, like, I'm a scientist. I try not to think with my gut. That's perfectly legitimate to sometimes say, I just have no idea. I want to have. I mean, I have 10,000 things to say on the topic about what possibly went wrong. But if I'm actually gonna given my real concrete opinion on what went wrong, I don't know. And it's actually one of the things we're going to find out in the next two games, or we're going to get some clues or some hints, I hope, because although we have nothing to play for in a sense, we do, because Jody Allen of all people, she needs to figure it out, because we need to find out. It's all. I agree with Zeb. Basically, it all comes down to Russ, but there's many different facets of that answer. It's like the diamond. You look at it from different angles, and there's a few other things. But is it Russ? Some people say, hey, he's become arrogant and he's become unrealistic, and his optimism. I've said this. His optimism sometimes seems to turn to hubris, or seems to turn to arrogance. There's a difference between thinking, hey, why not me, and I'm automatically always going to be successful at everything. No, you gotta. Russ has the tools to succeed, but he has to understand what his tools and what his talents and what his gifts are. And he may be a little bit of a victim of his own success. Maybe he does think. I mean, he seems to. I mean, there's signs of a little bit of delusions there, right? He actually seems to think he heals. He wants to create that image that he heals faster, even. So he comes back, and now he's admitting that he came back too fast. Well, very convenient. Maybe he feels his stock has dropped a little bit when he came back too soon, and now he's saying, yeah, I wasn't 100%. But he also wanted to create that image. He's a bit of a Superman, right? He wants to be all things to all people, and he wanted to have that little bit of Brett Favre image as well. And he shouldn't have come back. I think it's pretty obvious at this point. But his gameplay, like the last game was the perfect example. In the NFL, it's now become incredibly easy to kick a field goal, right? So even when the Seahawks are winning, like when the Seahawks score a touchdown to go up by 1 or to go up by 2, and there's a minute left in the game, you actually hate it if you're playing like Green Bay, or if you're playing Tampa Bay, Indianapolis, because you thought you were going to lose, because you know that Favre or Aaron Rodgers or Tom Brady, the good Watson, Deshaun Watson, the good quarterbacks can sort of score a field goal at will. They don't need a lot of time, right? So the last game, we had a minute and 2 timeouts to score a field goal. And that's a gimme. That's a game is over, we win automatically, essentially. Except we didn't even get a first down with Russell Wilson back there. So it all comes down to, so yeah, it's Russ, but is it Russ because of the scheme? Is it Russ because he's aged? Is it Russ because he refuses to play to his strengths? Is it Russ because the coaches refuse to play to his strengths? Is it Russ because Russ refuses to play to his strengths? Is it Russ because his strengths don't exist anymore that they once were, but he hasn't developed the new ones? Like people, I mean, even Sammy has told me over and over again on this podcast that no, Russell Wilson really can be a straight drop back passer, and he's got a high passer rating. Yeah, that's because defenses were taking into consideration the other things. They were playing him as he was. But if you're just playing him straight as a drop back quarterback, and he can't do those other things, that means he had to elevate other games in other areas. And I don't know if he has. That's what I'm saying. I don't know, and that's frustrating. I don't. It's because it's the most important question by far of the offseason. If Russell Wilson is no longer Russell Wilson, then obviously we have to move on. If Russell Wilson isn't Russell Wilson, but it's an attitude thing, can he get the eye of the tiger back for us? Or does he need to move on, but he's still worth a lot and we can get draft picks? I mean, I don't know. Zeb mentioned like draft picks, and yeah, I mean, like we are, that's a victim of being all success. I mean, of our own success, because yeah, we've drafted the bottom of every round for 10 years. And so that means that eventually they started gambling, because otherwise you decide you're going to have a bad roster. If you're picking 26th all the time in every round for 10 rounds, you're going to have a pretty bad roster compared to other people, unless so you have to try to moneyball it and find the things and try to be the smartest guy in the room. They've gambled. It hasn't always worked out, so that's a problem. And then it gets back to Shane. But even maybe the Shane thing is really a Russ thing. If Russ hand-picked Shane, or if Russ pushed Pete, you got to really, really get the guy I want. We got to have that style of offense. Because there's no argument that it's not at least partly on Shane Waldron. The offense, I mean, we can't get the ball to Metcalf. How badly has Metcalf regressed from last year? He went 6 weeks or something, 7, without a touchdown.
Yeah, he went from this past Sunday, from Halloween to this past Sunday. Halloween. So over a month and a half, month and 3/4, I think.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have a touchdown in November. Come on. You can't scheme that.
And took him until, I mean, really almost 2 months, because his lone touchdown came on December 26th.
Yeah. So anyway, there's a billion things, but it's all about Russ, and we got to talk about Russ in more detail. The options there, and maybe we'll continue that as some topic number 2. But if you don't know what's wrong with Russ, then you can't answer anything else. And I don't know what's wrong with Russ. I wish I knew.
Yeah. I mean, if I were going to go with one thing that went wrong, I think the easy answer is obviously Russell Wilson, but I'm going to look at Shane Waldron, because that's the thing that's been different. That's the only change that we've had, from previous years, where we've had a competent offense, where we've been in the top 10 in all these categories, where Russell Wilson has been great for a majority of the time. He fell off in the end of 2020 in regards to his offensive play, but, the biggest difference was thinking that you could get a first-year offensive coordinator that was the, quarterback consultant, the passing coordinator, the whatever position he had with the Rams. I feel like Shane Waldron shares like a huge part of the blame. He's not 100% responsible, but he's a huge component of what went wrong. With Ken Norton, we know he's going to run a Pete Carroll style defense, where it's going to give up yards, it's going to let people get catches and run the ball underneath, but in the red zone, for the most part, they're going to, really limit teams. They're the number 5, number 6 scoring defense in the NFL right now, and I don't think any of us would have expected at the beginning of the year that that's where they would be. But that is...
Okay, but Sammy, can I play devil's advocate
of course,
for a second?
Always.
Like, Shane Waldron isn't out there saying, Russ, overthrow the dude on 4th and 6.
He's not.
And he's not out there saying, hey, Dwayne Brown, don't block your dude.
He's not.
I get it.
He's not, but here's the thing, though. The thing that I think we as fans hate the most about any offensive tempo scheme, play calling, is people that refuse to just do to do what works. If you're doing great at running the ball in between the tackles, stop trying to run a sweep. If you're doing great at play action, stop trying to, go cute and then, run play action from shotgun when you obviously are not good at it.
Okay, but that's the thing, though. What have we done best for the past 9 years, 8 years?
If you were to ask me...
It's off schedule. It's off schedule stuff. So why...
But that's where Russ excels.
And he goes back, he tucks it, and he runs, and then he does that again, and then he scrambles and he throws off schedule to somebody. So why can't he do that now?
Because we have seen Russ work well in a hurry up offense, and that's not been always off schedule stuff. So yeah, to your point, it's kind of like, I don't know, why doesn't this work anymore? The easy answer is to say Russ, because the ball is in his hands, and to say, for the quarterback, when you are successful and you touch the ball 100% of the time in every snap, because you're either passing the ball, running the ball, or handing it off to your running backs, you deserve the share of the credit, the blame, and all the things in between. Just like the head coach. You know what I'm talking
about, though, Sam. You've watched the fourth quarter or the last half of the fourth quarter, those games where Russell Wilson just takes it over. He gets the ball back. and he doesn't even care what Daryl Bevel or Shoddy or whoever the hell's calling plays is calling. He goes into the huddle. They call the play, but then once he gets up to the line, he just looks around. And he's like, "I'm running this play because I got the first down. And this play, I don't, yeah, sure, but I'm throwing it to Lockett here." I mean, he's just doing his thing. He just takes over. He grabs. He gets in the zone, and he takes over the game. And he doesn't do that this year.
He doesn't do that this year.
I mean, I agree with you. It's a huge thing on Shane Waldron. I mean, I said that myself. So it's not that I completely disagree with you, but I'm just saying, like, when you say it's Shane Waldron,
I'm not saying he's the only reason. I'm picking that of all the things, right, because I think, to me, that's a problem that I've had since like week 2.
So why didn't we score? Why didn't we even get a first down last week on the last drive? Because, I'm not like attacking. I'm just asking you.
No, I think that's fair. It's like, well, I think one, Russ is playing poorly, and I think Shane Waldron can't help him. Like, I look at the games I look at the games where Geno Smith played, and outside of the Rams game where Geno came in like off of the bench, Geno looked pretty below average. He was slow at processing plays. He couldn't make a quick throw. Every play seemed to be a really long developing play, which, he doesn't have the legs to extend. He doesn't have a chance to like extend the play like Russell Wilson can, even though he's a younger guy. They didn't run the ball a ton, and until they did, the offense really sputtered. So Shane Waldron isn't helping the Seahawks by playing to the skill players that he has. And I understand, like, yeah, he's running with Alex Collins and DJ Dallas, but just because you're running with those guys, you don't have to abandon the run. So many other teams out there don't have great running backs, but they still run it more than 10 times a game. Like in the Rams game, the game that we lost, they didn't run for a quarter and a half. Their last running play came within like 5 minutes of the first quarter, and from the end of the first quarter until the entire end of the second quarter, they did not run at all. No run attempts, all pass attempts, couldn't convert on third downs, and they were just done. And people say, well, it's Pete's scheme, and he trusts the coaches to do that. But every loss, Pete always says, yeah, we let it get away from us. We didn't run the ball like we wanted to. And everyone knows Pete wants to run the ball. And if you don't have the players to run the ball, yeah, that sucks. But it means you don't just like abandon it because what you're trying to rely on isn't working as well. Russ is clearly not good enough to play at the level you want him to. So help him out. Let him hand the ball off. Trust your guys.
I think it's fair to expect a first-year offensive coordinator to struggle, and I also think it's fair to expect that coordinator to not run as much as you should when you have probably the worst stable of running backs in the league or close to it. But it's also fair to expect one of the league's best quarterbacks to be able and willing to make the throws to beat a cover 2 defense, and I haven't seen that from Russell.
Yeah, and I don't want to just repeat what you guys have already said in regards to the Russ, because we can talk about that later. But I feel like the offensive plan, everything that they want to do, everything they talked about wanting to do, they have failed to do. And Pete's the guy that lets his coordinators do their thing. He gives them a lot of freedom. And I feel like Shane has really messed up. Like, there's nothing that I look at Shane Waldron and say, like, wow, I'm really impressed by what he does.
Would you fire? Well, I guess we should move on.
Let's move on to topic number 2. And Ross, I want to know who will be here next year to fix it. So let's assume, you're gonna wave your magic wand. You're gonna go in your time machine. You're gonna do what you can. If you see the Seahawks as a functional team, who's gonna be here next year, and why are they fixing it? How do they do that?
Well, I'm going to be here, presumably. It's funny because, Pete Carroll has said he has no intentions of retiring or whatever. But it wouldn't, be like blow anybody's mind, and it wouldn't even take away from his legacy or whatever if he actually said after the season, like, hey, I'm done. I've been doing this since high school. I'm 70 years old. It's really hard to say right now because I know what it looks like on paper. Like on paper right now, looking around, it looks like it's from anonymous sources, infamous anonymous sources, that the Jody Allen doesn't think they're supposed to pull the plug on the whole thing. And so that indicates that Pete will be around and Pete will get to keep whatever people from his staff he wants to keep. Now that'll be interesting. Because like Zeb said, Shane Waldron's like a first-year dude. Like, oftentimes, good teams in their first year with a new scheme, especially on offense, don't necessarily get it, don't necessarily do great. Does Shane deserve another year to get it right, to like improve his play calling, and for the end of the year for the team to kind of get what he's doing? Since it is quite a bit different from Shoddy, so maybe he struggled to really put his signature on it. I don't know. Is Russ gonna be here? I don't know. Like, I know what I want to happen if I get to really wave a magic wand. I want Russ to get back to down to earth. I want Russ to be young Russ. I want, not like physically, okay, like you're aged. I want Russ to like up his self-awareness again. Because it's, like I said, last question or last topic, I don't really know. But if I have to guess, there's a multitude of things wrong, but I think part of it is I don't think Russ has a good idea I don't think he's being honest with himself right now. And I still think there's a lot going on there that's positive about him if he's honest. Well, I think he has the ability to even be the drop-back quarterback we all say he was, but he wasn't, in my opinion. But he's got to start like really, really, really working on it again. Get back to work on the things that matter. Don't work out as in like go through a whole game when you're injured before the game when everyone else is warming up and do your bizarre little thing in front of the camera so everybody makes sure they know you're still working. Screw that. Get back to work, Russ. Be hungry. Prove it. Don't think you've already earned it, because that's the difference. He thinks he's already earned it, so now he wants the credit, and now he wants the MVP votes, and he wants this, and he wants that, and he wants to win by passing, and like, screw all that. Uplift your team, lift up the people around you, and come back with Pete, because you know what? You had your best success with Pete, and if you both actually believe what you both publicly say, then you should get along better than anybody in the world. So one of you is being disingenuous, and I know who I would vote for right now. But I suspect what it's going to be is next year it's Russ is gone. It's going to be Pete with a different offensive coordinator, and he's going to say in a nice way, he's going to say he never really, really wanted Shane Waldron. That was an attempt to salvage the situation with Russ. And Pete's going to go back, and he's going to run the ball like hell next year, and everybody's going to be mad because everybody keeps saying that doesn't work, but it does work. I watched the Patriots run 5 times against Buffalo and win a few weeks ago. So I think my final short answer is
past 5 times.
Yeah. Sorry, did I say Rush? Sorry. Yeah, pass. Anyway, my final, my succinct answer is Pete's going to be back with who Pete wants to bring back. John's going to bring back, and I think this is going to be a learning experience for them all. I think you're going to see a little bit of a time machine from them, going back to, hey, this roster isn't actually good enough, and it's not doing what we wanted it to do. So we got to really, really be less complacent and really strongly, always compete, but you know what, like, do it for real again. Really evaluate what people are really doing. Everybody has to earn it because we're not a playoff team anymore. You're not the the middle linebacker of a Super Bowl or NFC Championship team anymore. You're just a guy. You're the middle linebacker on a 6-11 team or whatever. So everybody has to earn it from next year again.
Ross with the callback from topic number 1. Nice, well done. Zeb, who will be here next year to fix the Seahawks?
Well, let me tell you what's going to make me angry, and I apologize if you can hear my 1947 furnace in the background, but it's cold. So, if we come back, if we have this like kind of like last year's off season where they have some kind of kumbaya moment and everybody decides, you know what, we're going to give this another go together, and we come back with Russ and Pete, and we kind of just do the things the way we've been doing them, and we have another failure of a season. I think that's going to piss off a lot of people. Like, we saw that last year we needed change, and if they don't do it and things don't work, then heads are going to roll. But I think that Ross is mostly correct about what's actually going to happen. Not saying this is what I want. Obviously, I would love everything to work with what we have already and not have to make sweeping changes. And, I wanted Russell to be a career Seahawk. I wanted Russell to rewrite the record books and, be a first ballot Hall of Famer and win Super Bowls and all that stuff. Obviously, that's what if it was up to me, that's what we'd do. But I think most likely they're going to get Russell off and get what they can for him. Somebody's going to be willing to sell the farm for him. Because even though we who watch very closely may not believe he has what it takes anymore, there's going to be somebody out there that thinks, no, it's not his fault. We can fix that. And they're going to be willing to pay a very high price for him. So I'm thinking most likely Pete and John will still be here. I don't know that I'm buying them getting rid of Waldron yet. They'll probably give him another chance. But I think
if Russ isn't here, what's the point to keep Waldron? You don't think?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
Russ higher.
I don't see. I have to feel like Pete Carroll wouldn't bring an offensive coordinator in simply for that reason. He must see something, right? And
okay, go ahead. Sorry, it's your turn. Sorry.
I also don't know that it's fair to judge either of them based on what the other one has done entirely. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, fair.
So I'm just saying, I don't know that that's what's going to happen, but I do think you're right about Russ being the one that is moved.
The only thing I want to say about that is, it may be that I'm buying a little bit too much of my own narrative. I mean, it's funny because I'm often the person saying, "Don't pretend to know what you don't know." We don't know a lot of stuff, but I guess I do a little bit of it with Shane. I buy the narrative that I mean, Pete obviously was frustrated with last year not being able to adapt, but I think that Russ had a huge amount of input on this. On the Shane hiring, and I think that Pete kind of regrets it already, because I think also after Russ came back, we are running the ball a bit more when we can, and it just, reading between the lines, it just feels to me like Pete kind of went against his own philosophy to kind of give it a shot. Hey, maybe I'm wrong, maybe Russ is right, and maybe we can win that way, and I just feel like he regrets it. We're awful. We are god. I think it's even worse than we actually perceive. We are god awful on offense.
I think we're really bad.
Right, we might be 32nd or 31st in third downs.
Yeah, the fact that we can't convert a third down to save our life, and when we do, it's a miracle.
So I don't know if a guy gets us to 31st deserves to. I don't like to fire people after first, and I hate people prematurely saying fire. But if you're 31st and you got DK Metcalf and you have the Lockett.
Here's the question I would ask you before I kind of give my whole take on what it will take to fix the Seahawks and who's going to be here next year. Would you accept someone being that mediocre at their job in a position where you need excellence? Can you really afford that? Kent Norton Jr., we've had him for a long time. We've seen what he can do and not do as a defensive coordinator. He has always finished strong, even though he started off really, really, really bad, right? The biggest difference between this defense and last year's defense is lack of turnovers. That's really been the biggest difference that's keeping this defense from actually being better than what it is. They just can't get a turnover to save their life, and that's just... They have no pass rush. That's my take on it. And Carlos Dunlap had an amazing game last weekend. We couldn't take advantage. But with Shane Waldron, this is my thing with him. And, I know I've been harping about this guy forever, and I probably am just a broken record at this point. But I don't want Shane back because there's nothing I believe he can do better. Like if this in his first year as an offensive coordinator is like his low, I don't think he has that much of a high because there haven't been enough glimpses where I'm saying like, oh yeah, I'm really impressed that that running play worked or that play design worked. Like I'm watching all these other teams, all the teams that the Seahawks play week in and week out, do something interesting to get their playmakers the ball. And we can't do that. So if that's a Russ thing, great. We can figure out what to do with Russ. But if that's a Shane Waldron thing because he can't figure out, well, in like the first half of the first game of the year, I ran like bubble screens and jet motions with D. Eskridge, and that made the offense look really good, but I can't do it with these other guys, so my offense is just shot. Why would I trust that guy for the future? And yeah, to your point, Ross, Pete probably doesn't want to fire a guy after year one. Pete's always very protective, and he will always speak very glowingly about someone, and then he'll make the change in the offseason. Like we saw that with Schottenheimer, where he said like a week before the year ended, you know, we love Shotty. We think he's got a great future with us. And then after the poor playoff appearance where they lost at home to the Rams, Schottenheimer got fired. I can't figure out what it is about Waldron that makes me feel as if like he can turn it around. He can be better. Like I know what we could do to fix Russ, which is like everyone said, make him run the ball more, use more play action. Don't give him 30 passing attempts. Make him be great with 15 to 25 passing attempts, and that's enough. Like, I think we all are in somewhat of agreement of how Russ could be successful with the Seahawks and with Pete. I don't know if I could say the same thing about Waldron. I can say that about Ken Horn Jr.
You don't think he can grow? I mean, he's a first-year play caller.
I mean, I don't know how many in the NFL. I don't know how many times I'm willing to wait for someone to get better in year two.
And that's the big question. That's where the impatience comes. Like you know,
like, 1 year. Like if this were like if we were talking about like a business world where I'm like hiring and training someone, yeah, I give them more than 1 day to prove that they can be competent at the job. I think that's very reasonable. But in the high expectation world of the NFL, saying I'm going to be better next year is not okay. Like I don't want Jason Myers back next year, and he's on contract. Like I don't think he's going to be better.
But what if people turn around to you and say, like, Shane, it was his first year. Russell Wilson got hurt for the first time ever on his watch. So that cost us. And it's not Shane. Like I said, last game, like I keep harping, like we couldn't even get a first down, but that wasn't Shane's. Like it wasn't like how the offensive coordinator drew it up to say.
Right. Pete like, always talks about execution, and they failed to execute. I think that is a 100% legit reason.
Dwayne Brown's giving sacks up like he never has before.
I think that's totally fair. But if that's the case, if you know your team is flawed, find ways to scheme and protect it, right? Use more two tight end sets. Use your running backs. Use what you have available to you instead of saying like, well, my left tackle's kind of shot. He's not as good anymore, but we're going to run to the left side and hope that he can win that block because he's Dwayne Brown. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Our best running was behind the center, right guard, and right tackle to the right side.
Dude, Calhoun is going to be good. Isn't it weird?
Yeah, Kern is great. But, like, if I can see what the Seahawks are doing well, and then they decide they're just not going to do it anymore, if that's on Pete, then I want Pete gone. If that's on Russ and Russ refuses to change, then I want Russ gone. If Shane Waldron is calling bad plays, then I want Shane gone.
So what's your actual answer? So who's actually going to be here?
So who's going to be here next year to fix it? I think Pete is. Just like everyone has said, Pete has so much power with the Seahawks that he's the one that's going to be here next year to fix it. And whether or not I think that's the right move, and we're going to actually talk about that in the third topic here quickly, Pete just has so much clout and power. I don't see how Jody is going to make a change after one bad year. For all of Pete's flaws, Pete is more likely to fix this than just getting a new head coach and an offensive-minded head coach that's going to fix Russ. Because what Pete does is more than just a head coach. Like, I feel like it's easy to just look at the wins and losses and just say, okay, yes, good or bad. But what Pete does is it's a whole team, whole organization approach that I don't think we as fans, even the pro Pete fans, will truly ever be able to appreciate until he's gone.
Right, but if it doesn't translate to wins, then what's the point?
And if it doesn't translate to wins, then yes, that's where you have to say, like, okay, at what point has a message gone stale, and at what point do we need to make a move?
I mean, even if it's not stale, like if the players love him and they'll fight for him, but he's lost the ability to, for example, just again being devil's advocate, if he's lost the ability to win the game because he's got too much faith in maybe his scheme, or he's lost the ability to evaluate talent, or he's lost, whatever.
Yeah, I would say that, but we're not getting blown out. We're not like Urban Meyer, where we're like giving us obvious cues that the team, like the players, just don't get along. Like, everyone speaks so well of Pete. The team is close. Even though they're a bad team, they're competitive. Like, that is so hard to do in the NFL when you're a bad team, to not get blown out every week. And that's the thing that frustrates me the most, is that I know that they could be successful with just a few tweaks, and maybe for some people that's not enough. And I know a lot of people hate Pete's style of winning, which is keep the game close and win it at the end, because it's worked for us so long and we're seeing it fail this year. Like, a lot of people want to point to 2020 and say, like, you know what? If you change the one-score games, the Seahawks have a losing record. It's like, well, they don't, because Pete built this team to win one-score games, and that's why they went 12-4. Like, people want to think that team last year that won the NFC West was like an 8-8 team and just like squeaked into the playoffs, but they were a 12-4 team for a reason. They only lost 4 games. That's a very rare thing in the NFL, and yet people want to, like, say that was like just fluke and chance and luck, when Pete kind of creates that. So I think Pete's gonna be here next year, because I don't see Jody doing it. I feel like there are a lot of people that don't understand the Seahawks ownership and want to just make a lot of assumptions, because no one really talks to Jody other than Pete. So, but we've been rambling. We're going to move ahead. We're going to go to topic number 3. And Zeb, this is the Hawkscast podcast, so there's an actual poll on this question. And Zeb, which is easier to replace, the head coach or the quarterback?
I think, generally speaking, it's probably easier to replace the quarterback. Now, obviously, I assume we're talking about a good coach or a good quarterback, right? Because if you have a shitty one, they're pretty easy to replace. But I think when you're talking about, obviously, a great quarterback is difficult to replace. And we've seen, just in recent years, like the Patriots, for example, them try to replace Tom Brady. And although they're doing okay here with Mac Jones, he's obviously not Tom Brady at this point. So I think when you replace a head coach, you're changing everything, right? But if you're just replacing a quarterback and you have a good coach, then your team can probably be successful with a different guy, as long as he's got, a certain skill set, or is good enough. You don't need, you get rid of Peyton Manning. You don't have to bring in another Peyton Manning to be able to win, as long as you have good coaching. You just need somebody serviceable. And if we're talking specifics here, I think Pete's going to be a lot more difficult to replace in the long run than Russell's going to be. So for me, it's pretty cut and dry. Replacing a good head coach is more difficult than replacing a good quarterback.
Cool. Short, sweet. I like it. I appreciate that. Yeah. Just a heads up, this question is actually on the forum, so go to hawkscats.net. In the main forum, this question is posted. It currently has a 7-6 vote that the head coach is easy to replace. It's actually a really great topic, so shout outs to everyone in that particular thread. Ross, what about you? Which is easier to replace, the head coach or the quarterback?
I don't know. Man, since I read that, I've been thinking it over, and it's really difficult because, to be honest, ideally they're sort of linked. Like Bill Belichick and Tom Brady, and then Tom Brady moves, so people are like, oh well, Tom Brady then is the key, but Tom Brady's never Tom Brady if he doesn't have all those years with Bill Belichick, right? The number of quarterbacks who switch teams and still can win a Super Bowl versus the number of head coaches who have won Super Bowls or gone to Super Bowls with different quarterbacks seems like it's pretty comparable.
I believe there are only 3 quarterbacks that have moved to a new team to win a Super Bowl: Tom Brady, Drew Brees, and Peyton Manning. And then the number of coaches to move teams to win a Super Bowl, it's a little bit different because a lot of teams, they take over a talented team. So you've got John Gruden in Tampa Bay, Bruce Arians in Tampa Bay.
There've been a few coaches who moved teams and built them up again. See, I have this philosophy that I don't think most head coaches have the capability to get a program to the Super Bowl. I think it's very limited. The number of coaches who actually win Super Bowls is actually a relatively small percentage. So when you find one that can, I think it's really, 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 really worth holding on to until you're absolutely sure they can't do that anymore for whatever reason. It's hard to figure out. Like, you kind of capture the lightning in the bottle every time you go to the Super Bowl, obviously. It feels like head coaches should be. I think a lot of people think, but I think actually it's easier to replace a quarterback. And I think also, as we've talked a billion times, that you don't always have to necessarily replace the quarterback with the same level. It's a copycat league, so everybody's sort of doing the Tom Brady, Peyton Manning approach to roster building, but I think there's enough hints out there that you don't have to. But if you've got the coach who can run a program, and again, there's so much more to coaching than we see casually. Like you said earlier about Carroll, there's so much that goes on in the program, from the motivation to the structure to the organization, down to the paperwork and the extras and the scouring, looking under every rock for every opportunity to find a new idea that might help you. Even recover from surgery or whatever. Like, literally, there's just so much a head coach can do. I think it's harder to replace a head coach. It's easier to replace the quarterback, but there are certain exceptions, and there's certain other things to take into consideration. Maybe it's easier to replace the quarterback, but having an elite quarterback, maybe it makes things so much easier that you might be willing. I mean, it depends on also the level. If you're talking an absolutely elite head coach versus an absolutely elite quarterback, that's different from good and good. I mean, to me, it's not. It's such a nuanced question. And maybe I'm just confusing myself. But in most years, if I had to say, for example, in 2005, if I said going into 2006, we either have to get rid of Hasselbeck or we have to get rid of Holmgren, I would have said get rid of Hasselbeck, I guess. I think.
Ooh, see, I think I would have been on the flip side of that. If we're talking 2007, and it's Holmgren's, or 2007, going into Holmgren's last year.
I'm talking like the day after the Super Bowl, we lost it, and Paul Allen's just gone completely insane, and one person's gotta lose. You gotta get rid of either Holmgren or Haas as the scapegoat. The day after the Super Bowl, who do you get rid of?
Ooh, I think what makes this question hard on paper is you're kind of banking on what is available to actually replace them. So I actually voted. I didn't vote on the poll initially because I wanted people to kind of respond. But I voted that it's easier to replace the head coach, and I'm talking about in general, not Seahawks specifically, but a lot of people read that as a Seahawks specific question because it's on a Seahawks forum. Check it out, hawkscast.net. a lot of people made it a Pete versus Russ thing, and I think it is easier to replace the head coach because there's just so many more options to go with. You can get someone who's been a head coach before. You can, find an offensive coordinator. You can find a defensive coordinator. You can find people that can build your program. You can get a college coach, even though majority of them end up being terrible when it comes to being in the NFL. There's just more replacement opportunities for a head coach. Just the number of people that you could select to fulfill that position is just a wider spectrum of candidates. Quarterback, it's so much more limited. The way the NFL is set up, it's so hard to get a quarterback that is of a caliber that's going to be great. It's why they're so valuable. It's the reason why Matt Stafford can still net you a first-round pick, at 33 years old. And he had a really bad game.
Sam, you're driving me crazy today.
I'm good. I mean, it's good.
But here's the thing. Okay, if your goal is to win Super Bowls, you can find coaches anyway who can run a program. But to win, like Sean McVay got to the Super Bowl and he got blown out. And I would
3 points. I love that. That's my favorite stat about the Rams and Sean McVay. His high scoring second coming of the greatest show on turf. He scores 3 points in the Super Bowl.
Yes,
well done, Sean McVay.
And I would actually bet money based on small flaws I see in his logic and his thinking that Sean McVay will never win a Super Bowl. And by the way, neither will Matt Stafford.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of flaws in Sean McVay's scheme, and it's not to say that he can't compete for a Super Bowl, but I think that
he valued Matt Stafford so much. Matt Stafford is Jared Goff. He is.
I think Matt Stafford's a better Jared Goff.
Not statistically, not since game 3. He's Jared Goff, but with with better receivers in Detroit for a long time. He got to play with Megatron, and Matt Stafford never could win a playoff game. He got to play with Megatron and Golden Tate, and still couldn't win playoff games. They're the same person.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying Matt Stafford's the second coming of Peyton Manning or anything.
Jared Goff, I will say this: Jared Goff isn't. We talked about this earlier this season. Sometimes actual playing and actually winning. Sometimes for quarterbacks, it's a little bit different, which is weird. Jared Goff is a winner compared to Matt Stafford. I'm sorry.
So here's the thing, though: Jared Goff has not had a winning season except under Sean McVay.
Well, that's true of most quarterbacks.
Right.
But I'm definitely. Matt Hasselbeck never did either. Well, that's not true. I guess he did with Tennessee. But, tons of quarterbacks only, had winning seasons in their peak with their best coach. I mean, that's Dante Culpepper and everybody. That's true of almost everybody.
Right. But what we're talking about in that Matt Stafford versus Jared Goff, we're really talking about the Rams versus the Lions. The Lions are a shit organization. They have bad ownership. They have bad GMs.
Exactly. So if Jared Goff was in a good organization right now, Jared Goff has played in the Super Bowl, man.
Right, and Jared Goff has won a playoff game.
Never will. I'm not some Goff stan here, man. I'm not. I really not. I'm just making my point. Sean McVay is a good coach on paper, and he'll win you games. But if your goal is to win games, he's good. If your goal is to win a Super Bowl, he's not in that. He's not in that arcane group that it's very difficult to identify. He's not one of the not one of the coaches that can do it. There's a handful of coaches that can actually do it.
Sure.
And I don't know how to identify them, but it's not Sean McVay, and it's not that dude in Arizona.
Cliff Kingsbury.
It's not that dude.
Not Kyle Shanahan.
It's not as I said, it's not even Shanahan.
So here's the thing. To kind of put a bow on this topic, I would trust a new head coach. If I got to pick just the field of any potential head coaches, I would pick the field of head coaches to come in and take over this Rams team, and they would win a Super Bowl before Sean McVay wins one on his own. That's what I think of him as a coach. He's the John Gruden coming to Tampa Bay and taking over Tony Dungy's team to win a Super Bowl. He is Bruce Arians taking over for who I can't even remember who the coach was before Arians in Tampa Bay, but he's the Bruce Arians coming into Tampa Bay to win the Super Bowl. He's the Mike Shanahan to Dan Reeves in Denver to win a Super Bowl. That is how I see the Rams situation. It's not Sean McVay that's going to win. It's whoever replaces Sean McVay and takes over that talented roster. That's how the Rams win a Super Bowl.
They can't keep that talented roster much longer. They've sacrificed
everything. I mean, we've been saying that was going to happen forever, but they're doing it together with magic and fancy numbers somehow.
Yes, we'll see.
All right. Well, we've been going too long, so we're gonna wrap it up. This topic I know Ross is going to get hot and bothered with, but it's all right. So just it's par for this podcast today. Topic number 4, Ross, we're going to start it with you. Can former players come in to help save the team as ownership, as coaches, as consultants? We talked about this in our chat. There have been a lot of talk about players talking about Jody, talking about the Seahawks, talking about Pete. Some of them have clarified their thoughts. We're talking about Cliff Averill, Cam Chancellor, Marshawn Lynch. Russ has already said that he wants to be an owner in the future. Can former players come in and save the team?
No. I mean, did John Elway save the Broncos? I mean, if they do, it's just coincidental that they're former players. Being a former player does not give you any leg up on doing anything. Honestly. Like, just because you're really, really good at knowing where the quarterback's going to throw the ball before he throws it, so you, set career records for interceptions for the Seattle Seahawks or whoever, doesn't mean you know anything about, actually running a team. Or even coaching. There's tons of players. I mean, you never, ever, ever see a guy who was a former, first string quarterback become a really, really successful coach even. It's always the backups. Doug Peterson was a backup quarterback, and Harbaugh was a backup quarterback primarily in the NFL.
Tony Dungy was the starting safety for the Steelers.
Yeah, he was. And he slowly built his way. He earned his stripes. He earned his way up the ranks. There's some. Pete Carroll played college, but most of the time, being a star player doesn't translate over. And if it does, it's not that it's translating over. You just happen to have also that skill set. It's not connected. There's nothing about Tony Dungy playing safety for the Pittsburgh Steelers that helped him, organize his offseason training program for his team while he was a coach. It doesn't. There's nothing that helped him in the combine from learning his defensive playbook for the Steelers in 1977, 78.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
I have this football card somewhere. I mean, that's just not how it works. I mean, you grew up around it, so what? It literally doesn't matter. But it doesn't mean they're not smart people. I'm not saying Cam Chancellor, for example, couldn't have some positive impact. But the only good thing about the fact that he's an ex-player is that he can get attention. He's got some cred because of who he was in the Seattle organization. So then we can find out, hey, is he smart enough? Is he logical enough? Does he have an analytical brain enough? But I don't really understand the angle they're looking at right now where they keep talking about ownership. We talked about it in our chat. Seahawks are valued at $3.5 billion. Cam Chancellor probably made $65 million.
He made about 48.
48 million.
That's pre-tax, pre-agent, whatever he spent.
And he didn't do tons and tons of endorsements and stuff because he's a strong safety. So let's say he's got. Let's be generous. Let's say he's invested well. He's got $50 million now. Is he giving it all? I mean, how? Or you have an organization, you're gonna pool 30, 40 ex-players together to buy the team. That's not gonna work. They can't buy the team, so they can be brought in as consultants, which I don't. Maybe that's apparently there is something in struggle. The Allens have sort of professional devil's advocates that work in their office to confront Pete and to confront Russ with what they do, so they find out that the decisions are worthwhile, right? They brought in their football thought. So maybe you could do something like that. I don't know. But I have no idea if he's qualified. And can they coach? Well, I mean, I think there are a couple of Seahawks players who are coaches even on the team right now, aren't there?
Yeah. Aaron Curry being one of the bigger names.
Yeah, there you go. Aaron Curry. And who's their receivers coach? No, not him.
Pete Carroll's son was the receivers coach, I believe.
Did that dude even play college football? Anyway. So again, I mean, but again, even with coaching, I don't think necessarily you have to be a player to be a good coach. It's not the same skill set. It's the only thing good about it in that case is you do have to earn players' respect, right? And like obviously, if you're an ex-player, you have a bit, you get a leg up on getting the cred. But other than that, I don't think that necessarily being, and it's true with a lot of things, right? I mean, if you're a ship captain in the Navy, it doesn't mean you're also really, really good at planning a training program for the Navy or being in charge of acquisitions for the Navy. If you're a good teacher, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a good principal. They're different skill sets. So,
yeah. Deshaun Shedd is a former secondary player that is now on the team. So is Kerry Joseph, two former DBs that are on the coaching staff.
Right. I'm happy that they are engaged. I think it says a lot about Pete Carroll, and it says a lot about, because this doesn't always happen, right? I mean, like the fact that so many former players want to be involved and still care that much, that shows how much they were invested in the program, and that's a good sign. That's I don't want to be a negative Nancy or whatever the term is, and be just a jerk about things. I'm just saying, I'm a little skeptical when they say like, oh, well, they're going to talk about like buying a team. Russell Wilson's contract ends up paying $250 million, which sounds like a lot, but it's nothing. It's not 5% of the value of the Seahawks, and he's not going to put all of his money into it. You have to have this giant ownership group. Like, the numbers don't make sense anymore. You can't just be a dude. You have to be Jeff Bezos now to buy a team.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if they can talk their way into the office and say, hey, we've got some ideas, and let us be the devil's advocate to Pete, because Pete even knows us, and we can give us some pushback on Pete to make him like hold him accountable. Hey, cool. If they're that type, I don't know anything about Cam Chancellor's brain or how much damage he incurred. So I mean, like, if it was like angry Doug Baldwin and him, and I don't know. Oh, man, it's tough, because also these are also some of the players coming back from when there was drama. Like, I don't want like people who are like coming really biased, like with their anti-Russness, you're not black and bullshit stuff. I don't want that clique back in power either.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Zeb, what about you?
Better than me.
Can former players come in and be the savior that the Seahawks need in any capacity?
Sure. No, I mean, I think that having people that are winners and successful and have experience, having them around your program is probably can be very beneficial. I love the idea of a bunch of former players starting an ownership group to buy the Seahawks. The idea to me is super fun, but like obviously it's not going to happen. I don't think there's any real risk of that. I mean, Marshawn Lynch, okay, so for example, Russell is part of the ownership group that's supposed to be bringing baseball to Portland, right? So you could be a part of it, but guys like Cam and Marshawn, they don't have anywhere near the funds to make something like that happen. So it's fun to talk about, but it's obviously not a realistic thing that's going to happen. And then, yeah, I think former players can make great coaches as long as they have what it takes in them to be a great coach. It's not because they were a former player, like Ross says. Although, if you're a good former player, you've been around a lot of coaches, you've been in a lot of programs, so you kind of have an idea of what it takes to be a successful one. I think at least that makes you more qualified to be a coach than somebody off the street, right? The man, you have to balance out the experience with your skills. So you have people who are naturally good leaders, and then you have people that understand the game of football to a point where they can bestow that information and that knowledge onto other people. So there's tons of crossover there. I like Ross said, I love that guys like Cam are still that invested, and you see a lot of these former players on Twitter that still watch all the Seahawks games, root for the Seahawks. That's fun and that's good to see, and it does say something about the organization, or at least under Pete Carroll. So that's cool. But even guys like Walter Jones and Cortez Kennedy, rest in peace, was they were very supportive of the Seahawks throughout the years. Right. And obviously Walter Jones continues to be. So I think there's a place for guys like that to be involved in some capacity, but I don't know that that nobody's coming along and quote unquote saving the Seahawks as a former player.
Yeah, I think any fan who thinks that players have that clout and have that opportunity, these are millionaires that are going up against billionaires. Like, the gap between that is so big, it's hard to almost kind of fathom when you're talking about that kind of money. So anyone who thinks that even a quarterback of Russ's stature can come in and, flash his cash and say, yeah, I want to be a part of the ownership, like, they're going to get laughed out of the room, because the value of these teams have gone up so exponentially. It's you're talking about monopoly money. You're not talking with real numbers anymore. It's like it's like comical to a degree. Now, what players can do is they can definitely serve a role as like ambassadors to the team and consultants, and they can definitely get to coaches. But to Ross's point, the players that really make their way into being like long-term coaches, they're kind of the people that were never the forefront. They were good backups. They were good people that knew how to study, that maybe helped the starters succeed because they never got to see playing time themselves. Those are the type of people that seem to make it into the coaching ranks, because in order to get a chance in the coaching ranks, you kind of have to start young. It's very rare for coaches to become talented if they've only been a position coach for a year. They really kind of need to work their way through the system, because owners don't want to take a chance on anyone who hasn't seen huge level of success in a high position. Like, it's very rare where you've got the Jim Zorns of the world thinking that they're gonna interview for the offensive coordinator position wearing a tracksuit, and then being told, no, this is the interview for the head coaching position. He's got to go back to his hotel, get his suit, and then come back and interview. That only happens at really, really poorly run teams, and there are very few that are done that way, luckily. So
Jim Zorn's another good example, by the way. He was an exciting, dynamic, potentially great quarterback in a different situation, but as a head coach, he was mediocre. Maybe he never even got like a proper, even like fair shake.
He never got a chance though, because he was a quarterback coach in Seattle for a long time, and then he got the opportunity to become the offensive coordinator for the now Washington football team, and that they like pivoted really quickly and say, no, you're auditioning now for the head coaching job. And
he got screwed multiple times. I mean, he went to Baltimore and it seemed like he was going to move up the ladder there, but then there was a power play where like the players apparently were feeling more loyal to him than to the offensive coordinator and to the head coach, so they got rid of him there.
Yeah,
went to the XFL, and
Mike Ditka was a pretty good player, and turned out
Mike Ditka. Yeah, he's one of the exceptions. He was a great tight end. I think his rookie record still stands.
Was Ditka a tight end?
And it was also his best season.
Tight end. He was a great tight end for the Bears. Like in his generation, he actually had the record for. I mean, it still stands. Maybe now, maybe it was just broken, but he he had the most yards for a tight end by a rookie. Like that's from playing in when he played. That's amazing.
He had 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns his rookie year. I mean, it's by far his best year, but still great year.
Like so here's Ross. You said that the Seahawks, their estimated value is $3.5 billion. Paul Allen bought the team in 1996 for $200 million. Like,
this is why, for no matter how much the commissioners of the NFL, is why they keep coming back, because the commissioners know how to, like, they've hired the money man, not the football man, since way back, and the TV contracts have just made the values. You know, the Seattle Mariners, are worth $1.6 billion.
God, they're terrible.
They're trash.
So when you hear Russell Wilson talk about he wants to own even a baseball team, like, what are you talking about? Like, you're a millionaire, and that's nice.
Yeah, I mean, Russ is already a minority owner in the Seattle Sounders, but their value is like pennies to the Seahawks.
And aren't a bunch of guys minority owners in the Kraken too? Like,
I think that was like a publicity thing, right? Like, everybody, all the minor celebrities in the area all bought, like, $1 worth of them.
Yeah, so the Sounders are currently valued at $705 million.
Yeah.
Not bad.
The Kraken are worth $650.
Probably more right now.
I guess, to buy, I mean, basically the business license and whatever, they had to pay $650 to get in, so it's worth about $650.
The Seattle Times has them estimated at $875 million.
There you go. Okay, cool.
Yeah. So, I mean...
that's a return on an investment.
Right. So, it's weird. It's weird, but yeah, like, the people that are saying, oh, yeah, these guys are going to come in, I mean, that's more of a pipe dream. The economics behind it is beyond crazy. And yes, Tony, real quick, the Mariners have not made the playoffs in 20 years. The Supersonics have been to the playoffs more recently. The Cleveland Browns have been to the playoffs twice. They're on their way to make a third time since the Mariners have last been in the playoffs. So it has been a long time.
Mariners are going to be good this year.
I don't know if I believe they will.
They will be. What? They just barely missed the playoffs this time.
Their run differential is terrible.
Oh, you nerd.
I mean, that's what baseball's the game for nerds, and like that's like the biggest reason why they're not going to be successful.
They're going to be good.
Well, they have like seven. They have like 7 holes on their starting roster, so if they can fill that, then yeah, they might be good.
They're going to be good.
They need like 2 outfielders. They need a third baseman. They need a catcher. They need like 3 starting pitchers. So,
yeah, but they're going to be good.
All right.
They need a keeper and a sweeper.
Wishful thinking. All right. Those are our topics for the day. We're going to close it out, and we got a prediction, just one. That we're only doing one prediction for today because we've gone for so long, and this was planned. And that's the final score. So, Zeb, what's the final score for the Seahawks and the Detroit Lions? We didn't even talk about the Detroit Lions because I don't think any of us actually care. But what's the final score?
I'm going to say Seahawks 38, Lions 17.
Okay. Ross?
17-13 Detroit Lions, and we all go like borderline suicidal.
All right. Get that suicide hotline ready. We'll post it in the chat. Yeah, I'm not super excited. I'm going to say the Seahawks squeak out a 21-20 win. I haven't predicted the Seahawks win in a while, so I feel like I'm overdue. But we'll go 21-20 Seattle Seahawks. Yeah, and gentlemen,
that's fair. I think we're going to see that thing that happens where we're out of it now, and then we're going to play well, and it's going to be bullshit.
Yeah, that's unfortunately very likely to happen as well.
I see a lot of I really, like we talked about earlier. I mean, I'm really, really curious about Russell Wilson and what's wrong with him, and we're gonna see if we get any clues the next 2 games. If he just keeps sucking and sucking and sucking, I mean, because man, like it's the finger, of course, part of it, but I don't like Mike Salk was saying the other day. I mean, like in the past, You can say it's the roster, but the thing is, in the past, Russell Wilson brought up the level of the roster. Like last year, we also didn't have a great roster, but he brought it up, and it's the same. He doesn't do that now. He doesn't bring it up. So what's different? Is it he doesn't care? Is it that he's lost the the whatever that magic sense is? I don't know, man. We got to figure it out. We got 2 games to figure it out.
Yeah. Gentlemen, that is our show for the day. Time for some shout-outs.
Shout out to my mom and pop who just celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations to them.
Congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. Dak.
And to Sammy's parents who also celebrated their 46th wedding anniversary.
Crazy enough, my parents did celebrate their anniversary, but I forgot how long it's been.
Well, they were married on the same day, right?
I don't remember.
Not necessarily the same year.
I thought our parents had the same anniversary. Didn't we decide that at one point?
Is the 27th?
December 27th, 1975.
My parents did not get married. I want to say my parents got married in like 77 or 70 late 70s.
They're close.
Yeah, they're close. I mean, that's close enough. We're talking about decades at this point, so yeah, well, it's all in the same. So shout out to your parents and to mine.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to shout out to Baby 2022 coming in and Old Man 2021 on his way out. Hoping for a better 2022. 2 years in a row.
So. Yeah, we won't be doing a podcast until 2022. That is true.
Yeah. Yep.
I want to shout out to Mr. John Madden. He just passed away at the young age of 85. Always been a big fan of John Madden. He's part of the reason why I got into football with his video game and his commentary on football. So shout out to him and to all of his family. Shout out to Zeb and Ross. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. All the good stuff. Check us out online at hawkscast.net. You can find us at on Twitter at Seahawks Podcast, Seahawks Forum. Go to the forum, talk a bunch of stuff. It's going to be an interesting 2 games. We're going to be back to talk about them to wrap up the year. But until then, we wish you all a Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Hawks.